This video is brought to you by Moov Now, personal coach and sports tracker. Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd likes to film stuff, and today I want to take a look at the Moto G4 and the Moto G4 Plus. If you look at these phones right off the bat, they look exactly the same, except for just a few telltale things. This is for the laser autofocus, and then on the front of the G4 Plus, you've got the fingerprint sensor. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference appearance-wise. So for a while now, price points have absolutely fascinated me. I've always liked looking at the G line because you get decent phones without having to pay a flagship price. And then OnePlus came in and kind of confused the heck out of me. This is a $400 phone that's got all the specs pretty much as a Galaxy S7 for half the price. So I've been looking at these and I'm trying to figure out where do these fit in exactly in this market of lower price points now. Let's give the rundown on pricing. This starts at $200 and can go all the way up to $300 depending on which model you get. So for the G4, it starts at $200. You get 16 gigabytes of internal storage, 2 gigabytes of RAM. If you bump it up just $30, which is a no duh, you get 32 gigabytes of internal storage, still at that 2 gigabytes of RAM. Then if you want to have kind of pseudo flagship features, you can jump up to their flagship level of the G4. This is the G4 Plus. $250 starting for the G4 Plus, 2 gigabytes of RAM and 32 gigabytes of internal storage. And then if you want to go all out, $300 and you get 64 gigabytes of internal storage and you get 4 gigabytes of RAM. Don't forget our fingerprint sensor. With the G4 Plus line, you're also arguably getting a bit better camera. My ultimate confusion with these two is which one do I go for? Do I go for the $200 and $230 one, or do I bump it all the way up to $300? And in the course of playing with these, I kind of discovered that I'd probably go for the non-Plus, because I would be tempted to have the best of the Plus, right? But then for $100 more, I could get the OnePlus 3, which is just so much more powerful. So choices, lots of confusion here. I'm happy that the market is saturated though with a lot of choices. I'm going to get into specs and performance and all of that, but first let's take a look around these devices. So we've already established that these look pretty much exactly the same, except for just a couple of things. I do like the rounded look and feel of this phone. The back cover I've liked especially. You can choose different colors for your back cover. You can also choose to have a white face and also an accent color here as well on this metalish ring. I think that it feels good in the hand. We've got Gorilla Glass 3 on the front with a 5.5-inch LCD display. Also on the front, we have a 5 megapixel camera, which is the same for both of them. This is your speaker and your receiver. You can see there's no other speaker anywhere else on these. Then depending on which one you get, you've got your fingerprint sensor down here at the bottom. Then looking at the absolute bottom, we have a micro USB charging port, fast charging on both of them. On the right hand side, we've got our power button and our volume rocker on both of these. On the left hand side, you can see that there's nothing, it's nice and clean. On the top, we've got our headphone jack. Then looking at the back, you can see the microphone here, and then we also have our little dot for you to place your finger. Just helps stabilize the phone. We've got a dual LED flash on both of these. On the Plus variant, we've got a 16 megapixel camera, and then on the G4 variant, it's a 13 megapixel camera. There's the laser for laser assist autofocus. No capacitive buttons, very simple. Very clean, kind of understated. Though I do have to say that this sticks out like an eyesore on the G4 Plus. It's a little bit raised too. It just doesn't seem to fit in any way with the appearance of this phone. If we remove the back cover, it's going to be the same on both of these. You see you have a micro SD card slot. This is nice. That's something that the OnePlus 3 does not have. And then you have a micro SIM card slot, but they give you the adapter because everyone's having nano SIM these days. Battery is non-removable. Now while these do feel pretty nice in the hand, they are all plastic. This might look a little bit like metal, but it's also plastic as well. So everything from the back to the sides here, it's a completely plastic phone. It's not going to give you the sense of being a really premium phone like a lot of the other phones that are coming out. So now I'd like to take a second to thank my sponsors at Moov Now so much for making content creation possible and to share something with you all that I genuinely love. I've been looking for a fitness band that is not just another thing to charge. The Moov Now band doesn't need to be charged at all. It runs on a coin cell battery that can be changed every 6 months, and it's waterproof so I never have to take it off. It is a personal coach that runs off a 9-axis OmniMotion sensor which captures and analyzes your motion in 3D. I find it amazing that it knows what I'm doing. It can correct you of your form to prevent injury, motivate you to your exercise goals, and provides insightful data about your workouts during all this to help you improve. It is the only band that offers real-time coaching and feedback. I name mine Deborah. She whips my butt. Moov Now offers 5 sports programs that it coaches you on: running, cycling, swimming, cardio boxing, and 7-minute plus bodyweight workout. The app is simple. You just sync the sensor to your phone for your daily activities or keep it connected when going on a run, etc. It tracks daily active minutes and your sleep, as well as informing and motivating your workouts. Click the link in my description to purchase your Moov Now. Use the 10% off discount code for your move. Trust me, you guys, I really love this thing. I never want to take it off. So now we've got CPU Z fired up so that we can take a look at the specifications. We have the Snapdragon 615 SoC inside of this, 8 CPU cores. You can see you've got 4 cores that are clocked at 1.52 gigahertz and 4 cores that are clocked at 1.21. We've got an Adreno 405 GPU at 550 megahertz. You can easily tell between which is the plus and which isn't. I've got the 4 gigabyte RAM model right here. You can see this is 2 gigabytes of RAM for the G4, 64 gigabytes of internal storage, and 32 gigabytes of internal storage for these models respectively. Both of these have a 3000 milliamp hour battery inside of them. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So between the G4 and the Plus variant, they've got the same internal specs really, except for their RAM and also their internal storage. So I've been playing with both of these devices, and performance-wise, yes, because they've got very similar specifications, they're very similar. I have found, though, that with the G4 Plus, the top-end model, that the storage is a little bit faster than what we have with the 32 gigabyte one, and having more RAM really does make a difference. So essentially, what we're looking at is a better app experience. Apps launch faster, and also you can keep many more open, so app switching is a lot better on this variant of the phone. So looking at some real-world results with DiscoMark, I've got several applications open here. And to open all of them from a cold start, it took about 10.28 seconds on the Plus. And you can see it took about 12.26 seconds on just the regular G4. So just marginally faster. Then I did a second test, which was not a cold start, so essentially I was trying to keep as many applications in RAM as possible. This is just showing the app switching experience. You can see that it took about 4.3 seconds to switch between all these apps as they were already open, and then it took about 10.96 seconds on the regular version of the phone because it had to start up all of these applications over again. So there is a big advantage going from 2 gigabytes of RAM to 4. But otherwise, the general experience of the phone, both of them feel pretty good. I have to admit, though, that I am coming down and normalizing from the experience of using the OnePlus 3. This thing just flies. So I've had to adjust my expectations for a lower-end SoC. And it's not that bad. It doesn't fly like the OnePlus 3 does, but it's certainly powerful enough for daily tasks. I think where I notice it most is in web performance and also in gaming. So let's take a look at GFX benchmark, and this is where I think that extra $100 is really going to pay off between the Snapdragon 615 SoC to the Snapdragon 820 of something like the OnePlus 3. Look at car chase, for example, 2.8 frames per second versus 18 frames per second. That is a pretty big difference, and all across the board here, you can see that the 820's GPU is just a lot more capable. Down at T-Rex, we've got 18 frames per second versus 59 frames per second. So point taken. But of course, benchmarks are just benchmarks. They're synthetic. What really matters, of course, is what it's like in the real world. That's where I turn to something like a Game Bench Pro, where I can see what the frame rate is like in real time. So here's a graphic-intensive game, Riptide GP2. Looking at both of them, you can see that the median frame rate on the G4 Plus is 27 frames per second versus 45 frames per second. I still think that the game is very playable. All the games I've been playing lately have been extremely playable. It's just that there's going to be a difference in the overall perceived smoothness. So here is GP2 now. It's playing without a hitch. It's just not buttery smooth. You can see that it's totally playable. It's really not too much to complain about, and I'm not expecting the world from this SoC. Just keep this in mind. Otherwise, I've been finding that going about the interface feels relatively smooth to me. I've heard people complaining about stuttering and performance issues, but I haven't had any such problems. Sure, it's not zippy fast, but it's just fine. Now let's take a look at the features of this phone, starting with the OS. We've got Android version 6.0.1. And what I really like about Motorola's phones is that they keep it really plain and simple. It's a very vanilla Android. You don't see really any modifications. You've even got the Google Now launcher that is default on the phone. I have noticed that you do have some settings underneath the display though. You can see it says color mode. You can choose between the normal or the vibrant mode. In the display section, I will talk about how well this display is calibrated. Otherwise, we've got the Motorola apps. We've got Motorola Actions and Display. So underneath Actions, you've got chop twice to turn the flashlight on. So there you go. Do the same to turn it off. Flip for Do Not Disturb, so place the phone face down to silence notifications and calls. Pick up to stop ringing. Twist for quick capture. So that always works really well. This is something I've really liked with these phones. Then for Motorola Display, you don't have any sensors that you can put your hands over to have the display turn on. That would be on something like the Moto Z, and I'm going to be reviewing these quite soon. But the display does turn on when you pick it up. It gives you the time and notifications. You can tap on the notification to see what it is, pull down to dismiss it. Of course, you are in control of which apps can show notifications and then how much detail you want it to show. Just turn the feature off if you don't want to be bothered by this at all. You've got your fingerprint sensor down here at the bottom, which I find to be really nice and accurate. It's not the fastest fingerprint sensor, but it does seem to work from all different directions. The biggest bummer that I've had, though, is that it doesn't do anything outside of just sensing your finger. It's not a home button. It doesn't turn the display off if you hold on to it. There's no settings or anything that you can do with it. I'm hoping that somebody at XDA Developers is able to get this to work, maybe as a hardware button. I'm not sure. It would be cool to see, though. On my Moto Z, though, when you hold your thumb down, it unlocks it really quickly. If you hold down again, it turns off the display. Why this doesn't do the same thing, I really don't know. Now, taking a look at this 3,000 milliamp hour battery that we have in both of these, I've been getting about 4 hours or so of on-screen time. I think about 3.5 to 4 hours is realistically what I'm getting. So you can expect this phone to last you through the day. Plus it's got that fast charging, which is just excellent. So it's not something that you're really going to need to worry about too much. And I keep it about half brightness. I'm using this as a mobile office. I'm on Wi-Fi most of the day. Otherwise I'm out and about on LTE. I take some pictures. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. I compose emails. That type of stuff. So the battery life seems pretty decent. So let's move on to talking about these displays. Both of these displays are the same. We've got a 5.5-inch 1080p display, so that's up from 720p of last year. 401 pixels per inch. The viewing angles, they're okay. This display does get nice and bright, over 500 nits. It's got a decent contrast ratio, over 1200 to 1. All of this is set up for a display that I was quite excited about, yet you can probably see when looking at what white looks like on here that something does not look right. To me, this looks really quite greenish. So I did some measurements on both of these. I thought maybe I had a defective display, but it actually turns out that both of them aren't so good. The first thing I noticed on measuring is that this display is too greenish. The white point is very, very greenish, so it's missing both red and blue. You need to have a balance of red, blue, and green in order to make a good white point. So everything kind of has a greenish cast on this display, which really doesn't make colors look very nice. And then on top of it, it looks like the gamut, or the range of colors this display is able to show, isn't as wide as it should be. So it's not reaching the sRGB color space. It's actually falling short in the greens, in the cyans, and a little bit in the blues. So whenever you look at a color of green or cyan or blue, It's not quite the right color. It's not reaching the saturation that it should. I could probably blame this on a cheap backlight, but it really doesn't look very nice. Greens are not the greens that they should be. Of course, I went underneath display. You can go underneath color mode, and you can go between vibrant, and it's exactly the same. So the vibrant mode still has the same gamut when I measured it. All vibrant mode does is oversaturate the colors. It's like they didn't even try to calibrate this display at all. Why did you do that, Motorola? I don't understand. I know they have to cut corners in some places, maybe with having a poorer backlight, but at least they could have tried to calibrate this better. So it's got a green cast to all the colors, and then the colors aren't right because they don't reach the gamut that they should. Greenish displays look icky, kind of sick, so the colors are a bit sickly. So how about connectivity and miscellaneous? Starting with some miscellaneous things I didn't mention earlier, is that this no longer has an IPS rating. It's got a little bit of an ability for splash resistance, like some of the earlier versions of the Moto G, just because it's got a nano coating that helps repel water. But as I've seen with dunking plenty of these earlier guys in water, don't do it. Something is bound to short circuit inside. Sure, water can beat up and roll off, but this coating is not electrically insulating. Now, as a phone, this has been just fine. I've had a decent time with call quality. I've been able to get the speaker to get decently loud. I'm really happy that this phone gets LTE, so we're not falling short on the data speed here. With lower end phones, I guess you could expect to not get LTE, but yes, yay, you do. Everything else has worked fine for me. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS. There is no NFC on this phone though, which is kind of disappointing. You're not going to be able to use Android Pay, for example. For $100 more with the OnePlus 3, you do get NFC. Then taking a look at the available sensors for this phone, there's some things I want to point out. So comparing it to something like the OnePlus 3, you can see that there is no magnet sensor, so you can't use a compass, unfortunately. There's no orientation sensor either, but you do have the accelerometer and the gyroscope. So here's a compass, and it says no magnetic compass sensor found. Your device cannot use this compass app, so must terminate this app. I don't know if people are going to be really sore about that, but that's just to show you and let you know. They've got to cut corners somewhere, guys, in order to keep this at the price point that it is. So now let's talk about both of the cameras on these guys and some photo quality. So we have a 16 megapixel sensor on the back of the G4 Plus and a 13 megapixel sensor on the back of the G4. It's a 3 megapixel difference, although resolution-wise, I really don't see a difference. The G4 Plus has laser assist autofocus, and that's what the G4 does not have. Both have dual tone LED flash. Neither of them have optical image stabilization though, which is a little bit of a bummer. Both of these could do better in the low light department if they had that. On the front, we have a 5 megapixel camera on both of them. I am liking the camera interface, really happy that they've stepped it up. So now you have a pretty full functional manual mode on this. You can control for focus, white balance, shutter speed, which goes to a max of 1/5 of a second. You've got ISO and also exposure compensation. The 5 megapixel camera on the front also gets to take advantage of those controls as well. Most notable, you do have auto HDR, and that also works for the front camera as well. You've got 120 frames per second slow-mo, panorama, here's your video mode, and then auto camera. When you pull from the side, you have access to your other settings. Looking underneath photo here, something to point out is that 4:3 is the native aspect of the sensor for 16 megapixels. Everything else is going to be a crop. And then for video, both of these guys are only able to shoot up to 1080p 30 frames per second, so neither of these are 4K capable. So let's talk photo quality. It's hard to tell any meaningful difference between them, and results can be a mixed bag of tricks, but they both get the job done. That's the purpose here anyway. I think colors look pretty natural depending on the photo. I don't really see any more detail in the 16 megapixel images over the 13 megapixel ones. I feel that might be in part due to the amount of noise reduction in both of them, but I don't think that they overdo it. Both have a bit of an issue with focusing, which I have found annoying. It seems that the laser assist doesn't really help much so far. Also, both are pretty inconsistent in terms of white balance, being either warm or cold. I don't know which is going to pop up. The 16 megapixel camera seems to have a bit better dynamic range and also recovers more detail with HDR over the G4. Where I can see a consistent difference, though, is in low light. The G4 completely falls apart. The G4 Plus does much better and can actually be passable in low light. So camera-wise, if that really matters to you, go for the G4 Plus. So overall, I think that the cameras can take pretty good images. They definitely get the job done. It's not going to be as great as a flagship phone, but you're not expecting that. For the price, I think what you're getting is actually pretty good. So this is all that I want to say about these phones. I think they're pretty good phones. I think that the best bang for your buck is going to be the $230 model. Once you're stepping up to the higher prices, it makes me wonder why not go for maybe a more flagship-like phone, something like the OnePlus 3 or whatever else is in that price range of $300. Decent battery life. These feel really nice in the hand, even though they are plasticky. Performance is pretty good on these, although they do have a little bit of overheating issue. Both of them, I noticed that. So let me know what you guys think. This has been Erica, the technology nerd, likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video, and good night.